I think everybody's in to the last chair almost. Okay, a very warm welcome to everybody here to this Balie program we organized in cooperation with Bot Uitgevers. A warm welcome, of course, to the lucky ones here in the room and to the many people at home who are watching on the internet. It's a very tiny and cozy room. It's been described by The Economist just a few months ago as the epicenter of the Dutch liberal intellectual debate. We're very happy with that description, and it's small and it's and it's cozy indeed. My name is Yuri Albrecht. I'm director of the Balie, and I will try to chair this evening tonight. We welcome Senator Bernie Sanders. You all know that, of course. It's a very special time, I would think, to welcome him. We have, in a couple of months, we have Dutch elections, of course, and a year later, November 2024, there are important elections in the United States as well. So it's a good time to talk to Senator Bernie Sanders. We will speak about his book, of course. It's okay to be angry about capitalism. Translated into Dutch, het is oké om kwaad te zijn op het kapitalisme. We will talk about the book. Bernie Sanders will introduce his book, will speak about his book, and then we try to have a conversation on political change and on how to change the political system. He has many important things to say about that in his book, but it's very nice that we're able to talk about it. So we invited two people he, not personally, but as mentions of younger people, because he explains that it's very important to build a coalition across generations. So we invited for this conversation Yasmin Ait Abderrahman, chairperson of the FNV Young United, the young branch of the FNV. And we invited Tim Hofman, journalist, famous for his YouTube channel Boos, angry, yeah, I think that's angry, yeah. Bernie Sanders actually writes that, you know, the older he gets, the more angry he gets. So welcome to Tim Hofman as well. There's, of course, I mean, the Balie being a center for citizenship and participation and emancipation, you're very welcome to join in the conversation the last half hour of our meeting. If you have any questions, just keep them to the last half hour and try to get the attention of Marlijn Geurts, the editor who put this program together tonight, one of the editors of the Balie, who will try to come to you with the microphone. And remember, a question is, you know, a sentence which goes, at the end there's a slightly higher sort of tone of voice, and then there's a question mark. Please remember, because there's many people probably who'd like to ask questions. So let's start. Bernie Sanders' political career started in 1981, might be good to know, as mayor of Burlington in Vermont. He's currently serving as independent US Senator of Vermont, the senior senator of that state. But he's also the initiator and the face of a big progressive movement and a two-time Democratic presidential candidate. Give him a very warm welcome and a warm applause, Senator Bernie Sanders.
Thank you all very much for being here this evening. I hope you will find it informational and useful, and I hope you read the book, because it's a good book. Let me talk a little bit about some of the policy issues that I wrestle with every day as a member of the United States Senate, and then I want to talk about some of the political issues and how I think we can move forward to a more humane and decent world. What I discovered in running for President of the United States is that in my country, there was much more dissatisfaction with the status quo and the political establishment than people had perceived. In other words, people had thought, well, things are going okay. It turns out that for tens of millions of people, things were not going okay, and that people wanted change. And if you ask me the great challenge that we face in this moment, it is that change is going to come. And the question is, in America, and I think in many other parts of the world, what will that change look like? Will it be a change in which we create a more vibrant democratic society? Will it be a change in which we move toward more power for working people? Will it be a change in which we wipe out vestiges, all vestiges of racism and sexism and homophobia and xenophobia? Will it be a change which brings people together to create a common humanity? Or, on the other hand, will it be the change that moves us toward autocracy, more and more war, where countries are divided by where people came from or the color of their skin or their sexual orientation? Change is going to come. There is massive dissatisfaction with the establishment and the status quo in America. And I believe that is true in many other parts of the world. So the fight that we are fighting right now is to bring our people together, working people and young people, people of color, to fight for a society where government and the economy works for all and not just the few. Now, what are the issues that we deal with, and how do these issues relate to our politics? Number one, to my mind, the existential, and I don't use that word lightly, the existential threat that we face is climate change. And that is, and the difficulty of that issue is that if Holland does the right thing, it's great. And if Europe does the right thing, it is great. And if the United States does the right thing, it's great. But we need to fight climate change international cooperation. We are in the same boat. And what I worry about right now is that there are forces in the United States and in China. China is now the world's largest carbon emitter. And they are doing some good things in terms of sustainable energy, but they're also doing a lot with coal. If we don't bring the world together, we are not going to address the climate crisis. So climate is not just a Dutch issue or an American issue, it is an international issue. And whether or not we will succeed will very much relate to the kind of world we leave our children and future generations. Now, what we do in that book is talk about issues that, at least in American society, and I suspect in Europe as well, are not talked about a whole lot. And when we talk about politics, we talk about power. Who has the power? Who makes decisions? And the truth is that in my society, not to be talked about at all, not in the corporate media, not in the halls of our Congress, is the fact that we are rapidly moving toward an oligarchic form of society. You'll know what I mean by that. What oligarchy means is that you have a small number of incredibly wealthy and powerful people who make the key decisions as to what happens in our economy and in our political life. So in America now, and again, we don't talk about it very often for obvious reasons, but in the United States now, we have more income and wealth inequality than we have ever had in the history of America. And that manifests itself with 3 people, multi-billionaires, owning more wealth than the bottom half of American society. In America today, while the very, very rich are becoming much richer, there has been a massive transfer of wealth over the last 30, 40 years from the 90% to the 1%. In America today, 60%, 60% of Americans are living paycheck to paycheck. I don't, is that a term you're familiar with here? All right, that means you get paid and you got nothing to save. You got to use your check just to pay the bills. And there are studies out there. Tens of millions of Americans, if they had their car broke down and you needed to spend $500 to repair the car, that would be a financial disaster for that family. They don't have the $500. So what we have is a growing gap between the very rich and the middle class, a sinking middle class. And that wealth and income inequality then manifests itself in political inequality, which means that in America, not in most countries in Europe, But in the United States, if you are a billionaire, you can spend hundreds of millions of dollars in a political campaign. Got that? What you do is start up what we call a super political action committee, super PAC. And you take a check, you put several $100 million, and with those hundreds of millions of dollars, you can influence races all over the country. So you have not only an economic oligarchy, but incredible power of the 1% over the political process. So when people ask me, why don't we see progressive legislation in the US Congress, that is certainly a major factor. People have to work very hard to get campaign contributions, and they come from very wealthy people, and instead of representing the working class or lower income people, they are busy representing corporate interests. Another key issue that we wrestle with every day, and I certainly would not have said this to you if I were here 10 years ago, but that is the future of democracy in America. And it's certainly not only in the United States. Democracy is a reasonably new phenomenon. 120 years ago here in Europe, you had people ruling this divine rights. God gave them the right to have all the wealth and all the power. And some revolutions changed that. But right now, in America, and in many parts of the world, democracy is in trouble and on the defense. And we can discuss why that is so. But I think for many lower income and working class people, they look at their lives in the United States. They can't afford health care. They are working for very low wages. They can't afford housing. They worry very much about the future for their children. And in certain parts of America, the situation is so bad. I don't know how much it is known here in Europe, but our life expectancy, how long we live as a people, is actually in decline. So the United States has, for a very long time, lagged behind other developed countries in terms of how long we live. But right now, our life expectancy in certain parts of the country is actually declining. And that has a lot to do with what we call diseases of despair. And that is a phrase developed by some doctors. And what they are saying is that many people are giving up literally on life. And they're turning to drugs. And we lost, if you can believe it, in America, 100,000 people last year to drug overdoses. They're turning to alcohol. They are turning to food and becoming obese. And they're turning to suicide. And the result of all of these factors is that life expectancy in the United States is actually in decline. So something that should be on all of our minds is, how do we create a vibrant democracy? What does a vibrant democracy look like? Why is government not representing the very pressing needs of working families? I'll give you one other example. It's not just income and wealth inequality, and it is in America not just the fact that 60% of our people live paycheck to paycheck, or some 500,000 people are homeless. Today, the weekly wage for the average American worker, despite huge increases in automation and technology, is lower than it was 50 years ago. You got that? So today, in real inflation-adjusted dollars, the income, the weekly earnings of an average American worker is less than it was 50 years ago. So you ask why people get distressed, why they're angry, why they're in despair, is that despite the fact that workers are now hundreds of times more productive than they were 50 years ago, they're actually earning less money. So what are we trying to do about all of these things, among many other issues? What we are trying to do is put together a progressive movement in America, which is multi-generational, which is multi-racial, which is trying to bring together people from all over this country to stand up and aggressively fight for economic justice, for social justice, for racial justice, and for a world of peace. And we have had some rather extraordinary successes. It's not widely reported here, either in the United States or here. But right now, in the US House of Representatives, over the last 8 years, we have elected dozens and dozens of very strong, mostly young, often people of color, progressives. People who are prepared to stand up to the 1%, stand up to corporate greed, stand up to racism. And in fact, within the Democratic caucus of the House of Representatives, there have never ever been as many strong progressives as we have today. Not necessarily the case in the Senate, but it is the case in the House. We are also winning seats in state legislatures around the country and in city councils. That's the good news. The bad news is the right wing is also growing in support. And if you ask me who the next president of the United States is going to be, I would say at this point, I really don't know. It certainly could be Trump. It certainly could be Biden. I think a little bit more likely that it will be Biden, but not by a long shot. So what our job is in the next year is to rally the American people around a progressive agenda, which among other things means tackling income and wealth inequality, creating a political system which is based on one person, one vote, not how much money you have, deals with addressing the crisis of climate and creating millions of jobs in sustainable energy. So that is what we are struggling to do. And of course, these are not just American issues, they're global issues. And I will say to you that the times are very, very serious. And I hesitate to wager a guess as to what this world will be like if we are not successful. So we're in this together. Let us go forward and let us create the kind of society that I think we can and should be creating. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Senator Bernie Sanders, for this introduction. There's a lot more about this and how to go about and analysis of our time in your book. But maybe just a first reaction on what you just said, a few questions, and we turn to the other two people on our table. I would like to make you a big compliment by saying you are, and don't get me wrong, you are the good Trump. The just Trump, the man who went for the establishment in the Democratic Party, and he went for the establishment in the Republican Party, and he went all over the country to address this, a lot of times the same people Trump is addressing. And you described them in your book as well, and you're saying the despair and the people who have no future, and you feel for them. You can feel that you feel for them. But can you explain to me, because it's mind-boggling, I think, for most Europeans, why those people, and you say, are there bigots, are there racists? Yes, there are, but most of the Trump voters are not. That is a quote from your book, which I think is a fair point. But to Europeans, it's mind-boggling. Why do they vote? Those people, you know very well. You tapped into that part of the population as well. Why do they vote for
well,
him?
I mean,
it's for a European difficult to understand, I think.
Well, I'm not so sure.
Maybe not,
because
no, but please.
It goes on in Europe as well, and in some cases in more extreme ways.
Yeah.
I think the answer is put yourselves in the shoes of a working class person who's just right now, one of the exciting and positive developments, and I should have mentioned it in my remarks, that's taking place, is the revitalization of the American trade union movement, which for many years was kind of dormant. And what we are seeing all over the country is workers now demanding to form unions. We're seeing young people at Starbucks and Amazon on college campuses. We're seeing blue-collar workers. We're seeing white-collar workers. In my own city of Burlington, Vermont, you had doctors coming together, residents in hospitals forming a union. And right now, as some of you are aware, there's a major strike going on in the automobile industry, where the United Automobile Workers are taking on General Motors and Stellantis and Ford. And what they are talking about, which is very exciting, is ending corporate greed in America, all right? So you asking me why there is despair and why people vote for Trump. And the answer is that if you are earning less money than you made 20 years ago, if you can't afford to send your kid to college, if you're lucky, you have 1 week paid vacation, and we don't have paid family and sick leave, if you can't afford childcare, if you can't afford housing, and people come, hey, I'm with the Democratic Party, vote for me, look at all we have done for you. They say, you haven't done anything for me. I'm worse off than I was 50 years ago, okay? And Trump comes along and says, I'm gonna end all this. I'm taking on the establishment, I'm taking on the deep state. I'm gonna do things for you, and I'm gonna tap into your anger. And the cause of your problem is not the rich and the powerful who sent your jobs to China or to Mexico or don't let you form a union. That's not your problem. It's the immigrants who are coming in. Or it's gay people in your schools. That's your problem. And I'm going to lead you against them. And I'm going to tap into that anger. People are angry. They have a right to be angry. And the question is how that anger is focused. And I got the whole establishment out there who does everything that it can to deflect attention away from the people who really have the power. So that is, the short answer to your question.
Thank you. And you're absolutely right. I mean, we have the same problem in Europe, but it's the...
I mean, how often in Europe are you talking about, is oligarchy just a Russian issue or an American issue? You don't think you have oligarchs here? I would be quite surprised if you don't. All right. And the same people that we have to deal with in the United States.
It's been a terrible weekend, and this is a more personal question, but you were on the road, but you probably watched the news. Like many other people in this city, Amsterdam used to be a very Jewish city before the war, and I know a lot of people in this room has had an awful weekend looking at a lot of people in this room tonight as well. So I presume you had as well. Is this making a journey like this, talking about your book and the future, more difficult for you?
Well, it's what happened is horrendous, and I'll tell you why it's horrendous.
I'm asking about Israel, of course.
What Hamas did. And obviously what is terrible about it is there will be, we don't know, but there will be many thousands of people who will die as a result of what Hamas did and be injured, and Gaza will be leveled. So the living conditions in Gaza before this were absolutely horrendous. And one of the absolutely horrendous. You had unemployment among young people of 75%, intermittent water, intermittent electricity, healthcare, not good. That is before this. It will become much worse as a result. Now, what has upset me very, very much, that for those of us who are trying to call attention to that, to call attention to the Israeli occupation and the terrible things that Israel was doing, what Hamas did will make all of that much more difficult. And it will appeal to the extremists on both sides. What the right wing, Netanyahu, and those even further to the right of Netanyahu will say, you see, we were right all along. You can't trust the Palestinians. And then what the Hamas people will say is, hey, you see, we can have some little military success. We can get some revenge for what they did. And the idea of working together becomes a more and more distant dream. So it is very, very distressing in terms of what happened, absolutely.
And since you've been on the Senate for very many years, you know a lot about foreign policy. You've done a lot in foreign policy also. How worried are you that this will develop into a much wider conflict the United States Biden just released $6 billion for the Iranian, frozen Iranian assets for Iran. And the first reaction after that is this massacre, which obviously has been trained also and paid for by Iran.
That may be the case. I don't know. We definitively know that. But the deal with Iran had nothing to do with, I think, this event and should not be confused as such. But you're asking a question. Look, if we are going to bring this world together, you know, what happened, what Hamas did, only makes it that much more difficult. And I felt in a similar way, I have to tell you, and was a little bit involved in this, with Putin's invasion of Ukraine. And it was just, and I think for Europeans and maybe more than Americans, your people, you lived through World War II. And I think that there was a feeling that that kind of horror and brutality would never again take place on the continent. And here it is. And, you know, to have to put, there are so many problems in our country, and to have to put money into the military, which I support money for Ukraine, is just, again, very distressing. But these are some of the crises that we face as a world right now that we're going to have to do our best to address.
Thank you. Turning to the table.
Hi.
I'm just welcome you too. Yasmin Ait Abderrahman, you are 23 years old, and you are involved in political organizations such as the FNV, the biggest union of the Netherlands, and you have a seat in the SER, the Social and Economic Council of the Netherlands. Being 23 years old, it's an interesting position, of course. How did you listen to the challenges ahead for, you know, other generations who will live longer on this planet? And how did you listen to Bernie Sanders' speech just now? What struck you, or what would you be for your first comment?
Well, first of all, it was very interesting to hear you speak. Thank you. Well, there were different things that struck me. But my first question would be, you mentioned that the situation in the United States is very different from Europe. And I think that the term capitalism has a very different connotation in America than it has in Europe. So I'm wondering, a lot of the problems that are in the United States, like housing, minimum wages being too low, they also happen here. But if you were a politician in Europe, what would be the first thing that you would tackle?
Well, I think we have to tackle all of those issues. As it happens, I'm the chairman of the committee that deals with issues like the minimum wage. And we're going to bring forth legislation to raise the minimum wage in America to $17 an hour. But the point of the book is that while we tackle individual problems like housing, which is a very serious problem, I know it's serious here, it is very serious in the United States. Childcare is a disaster in the United States. While we tackle the individual problems, we also have to ask the deeper questions about the structural dynamics of the system. Who has the power? So the answer right now, and what this book really is about, is the status quo may not be working for you and your friends. It is working for the people on top. In fact, I think it's fair to say that the 1% have never, ever had it so good. I suspect that's true in Europe. It is definitely true in the United States. They have more money, more power, and they like it. And the point that so I think those are issues that we've got to tackle. And I will tell you also this, based on personal experience, that these people on top, you know, they come across as nice guys, and most of them are men, not all, most of them are men, and they make donations to charities, and they have buildings and universities named after them because they're deeply concerned about education, deeply concerned about women's rights. Don't believe it. They are not nice guys. They are extremely greedy people who literally are addicted to more and more money, and they will not rest until they get more and more and more. So to answer your questions, we have got to deal, and it's my job. I'm chairman of a committee that deals with a lot of that stuff. But we also have to look at the big picture and how we wrest power away from these very small number of multi-billionaires.
Amen.
Tim.
Hi.
Tim Hofman. I would say the same question for you. You've been making programs for 7 years, isn't it, now with Bose?
With Bose, yeah, and a couple more years without Bose.
Yeah, and Bose means angry.
Yeah, it means mad, angry.
So same question to you. If you listen to this, there was some very inspiring anger.
Yeah.
You just heard?
Yeah, I heard so. And
what would be your first?
Yeah, two things. So I read in your book that you've been in the public eye for 50 years. When I hear you speak, you seem less tired than I am as a 35-year-old. How do you do it? But seriously, how do you keep that flame burning and stay? You have the choice to get lazy now, you know, but you don't. How do you do this?
Well, I think for a couple of reasons. As a U.S. Senator, you see with your own eyes every day the horrors that go on in my country and in the world, all right? You see it. So if you want to escape and live in a closet and you don't have to see these things, that's one thing. You can watch TV all day. But I see it, so I confront it. Right now, give you one example. As former chairman of the Budget Committee, we put billions and billions of dollars into childcare in America, which has always been a serious problem. That appropriation has expired. And right now, it is quite possible that millions of children are going to lose their spots in child care centers. Okay, I deal with that every day. I go around the country, and running for president, the honor that I had was to go to virtually every state in America. And I talked in meetings like this, a few hundred people, sometimes very large rallies, but sometimes groups like this. And people got up and they said, Bernie, I went to the hospital and I came out with a $100,000 debt and my family went bankrupt as a result. And people start crying in the room, all right? I see that every day.
But you choose to see that, don't you?
I mean, that is,
yeah.
All right, that's fair enough.
Yeah.
But that is, among other things, my job. I see it as my job.
Yeah.
All right, that's what I'm paid to do, not to run away from those realities. That's one thing, that I see them every day, and you have to be kind of cold-hearted not to respond to those realities. But the other thing that I want to say on a more optimistic note is that I want everybody to know this. My wife always tells me that we should hand out Prozac at the end of my speeches because I get everybody totally depressed. And I don't want that to be the case, because what I do want to tell you, and why I get into it, I'll tell you why.
The pharmaceutical industry is already doing very well, so you shouldn't be handing out Prozac at the end.
I have had the fortune, the joy of being able to speak to 25,000 people of every background in the world, of every age, of every color, okay? And understand that those people want fundamental systemic change in the United States. It is there. I saw it. I witnessed it. I am part of that. Follow what I'm saying?
Yeah.
So if you know that there are people all over the country, people who are on strike right now. I had the privilege of being in Detroit a couple of weeks ago, standing with them, black and white, standing up to incredible corporate greed. So to be part of that inspires me, to see people's courage inspires me, and it gives me optimism. So that's why I continue to go on.
Thank you. It's inspiring. And can I ask another question?
Yeah, you can.
Okay, so to me, I think we share the same values and the same mission, maybe, from another perspective. As for me, it's more, you're a politician, I'm a journalist and activist. But I think we want to end at the same point. So I walked in here and I said hi to a CEO of a bank. And we were like, oh, I haven't seen you in a while. And I think you and I both make quite a lot of money, more than the average American or Dutch.
More than me.
More than you. Yeah, but it is, isn't it? Yeah. I'm white, I'm male, I'm cis, I'm straight. A lot of privileges. How do you, it's a personal question, not get part of the establishment? How do you stay the outsider with the fresh ideas? As someone who's in politics for so long in the most wealthy and powerful country in the world?
That's a good question, and I don't know that it's, as my wife will tell you, in all the years that I have been in the Congress, and I was in the House of Representatives for 16 years, and I'm completing my third term, 18 years in the Senate. I have never spent one weekend in Washington, D.C., except once I was sick and couldn't leave. Okay? I am never there. It is not my culture. And I'll tell you something else, personal. Don't tell anybody, okay? Turn the camera off now. I used to go, the way Congress works is mostly you go in on Monday night. You have votes on Monday night. And I would find that as soon as I came back, I was feeling a little bit depressed. And it took me 10 years to figure out that it always happened on Monday night. And because the culture in Washington is such, it's a lot of phoniness and just not real life. And I have staff who feel the same way. They go home where they're human beings, normal people, and you come to Congress. It is very, very different. So I grew up in a family that did not have a lot of money. And that's something that has played a very important part in my life. My family struggled economically, and that is something I have never, ever forgotten. So it's a combination of knowing and remembering where I came from, and knowing that tens of millions of people in America are in exactly the same boat as my family was. And second of all, also, I'm just not comfortable with a lot of those.
You don't like the people? Or?
Yeah, in many ways I don't. I mean, you know, it's complicated. We can get into who they are. But many people don't even know that they're on the take. In other words, if you were to go to some of my colleagues in the Senate and say, why are you, you know, you got $100,000 in contributions from healthcare companies or the pharmaceutical industry, and you're doing their bidding, they would be shocked. They would honestly tell you, it has nothing to do. Yeah, I did, but really? I just do it on my own because I think it's best. In other words, they buy into this. But the culture of money in Washington, D.C. is extraordinary. I'll give you one tiny example. 535 members of Congress, 100 senators, 435 in the House. There are 1,800 well-paid lobbyists. You all know what a lobbyist is?
Yeah.
From the drug companies.
It's the same word in Dutch.
Oh, yeah, we do.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can you imagine? 1,800 lobbyists, former leaders of the Democratic and Republican parties, telling Congress why we should not regulate the pharmaceutical industry and why we pay the highest prices in the world for prescription drugs. That's the culture that exists there.
But you could say that you've been in the game for a very long time. I don't like to remind you of your age, but you've been in the game for a long time now.
And I am 40 years of age, you're right.
As a senator, of course, you could say you are kind of the establishment. So if you look back now, do you feel like this is for you the most effective way to make change? Or would you do it differently if you could start over now?
Look, change takes place in many ways. You're in a union, right?
Yes.
I am a strong believer. In fact, there will not be the kind of change we need in America without the growth of the trade union movement. So I applaud people who are organizing, who are demanding decent contracts for their union members. Journalism, my God. In America, as I think I mentioned earlier, there are 8 very large global media conglomerates that control 90% of what the American people see, hear, and read. So I have the feeling that what you talk about and write about is something that the mainstream media, the corporate media, will never touch. It is enormously important. In America, we have people who are organizing around housing. They're organizing around racial justice. I don't know that there's any one thing that's more important. I've gone in, I won't give you my whole history. It's a little bit in the book about how I got into politics, but it was very unconventional. I mean, I didn't just walk into the Democratic Party. I'm an independent, the longest serving independent. I became elected mayor of Burlington, defeating a Democrat. So my political history is different. But if there are people in this room who want to get involved in politics and be strong political leaders, that's great. If you want to get involved in journalism, and certainly the internet opens up all kinds of opportunities, that's great. Union organizing, many other areas. I don't think there's any one way. I think it's all those ways.
And can we go a little bit more into this idealism or pragmatism about changing, making change happen? Because you obviously are well versed in both. You started a movement which, from the outside, which is a political movement for real change, and as a senator, of course, like you just described, many terms, you know the implications of the inside. So there's pragmatism and there's idealism. And if you decided not to run a third time for president, but to endorse Joe Biden, do you regret that? If you see now at the moment that there's might be a last possibility for real political change? Huh?
No, I don't. Biden is the president. I think engaging him in a primary and dividing the Democratic Party at this key moment in American history would be an improper thing to do. I think, look, politics is not easy stuff.
No.
Okay. And if somebody wants to get up and criticize Biden, I will join you in that criticism. Okay? But on the other hand, the moment that we are at is if Biden loses, what I suggest to you is democracy in America is very much at stake. And I think what we have got to do at this moment is to bring our people together, to elect Biden, but simply to do more than that, to push the president to be the most progressive president he can be. And I will tell you also that, as somebody who knows the president, known him for many years, his record is far more progressive than you may know. And I think his team does not do a particularly good job in talking about what they have accomplished. And we can go into it later if you would like to. But our job is to bring people together, to bring people in America who don't vote into the political process, to create a progressive agenda. What we did in the 2020 election after I dropped out is the Biden team and our team worked together on about a half a dozen issues on climate, the economy, education, healthcare, et cetera. We brought forth some of the most progressive thinkers in America. He brought more moderate people together. They sat down, they came up with ideas, and some of those ideas have actually been implemented. So our job is to bring people together, to push the president to be the most progressive president that he can be, and to defeat Trump. I think that is the task of the moment.
Because, for instance, Colonel West, a Black American activist and philosopher who endorsed who endorsed you very much so, said that you're too fearful of Trump's fascism and you shouldn't endorse Biden because it's window dressing for the Democratic Party.
Cornell is a very good friend of mine and a brilliant writer, and I would recommend you read some of his many books.
Yeah.
I think he's wrong.
But what would you answer?
I am afraid about. I am a precise. What was the say that Cornell said?
Well, I quote him: "You're too fearful of Trump's fascism."
Yeah, I am very fearful of Trump's fascism.
So he's right on that point. But,
yeah.
but
I don't see how anybody cannot be fearful. I wouldn't necessarily use the word fascism in the European sense, but I am very fearful of his autocracy, his destruction, his contempt for democracy, his undermining American democracy. Of course, I am very fearful of that.
Yeah, but you also write in the book, and that's your quote, we are pretty bad. You'd say that the Democrats say we're pretty bad, but Republicans are worse. Right. So vote for us. We're the lesser of two evils.
Well, sometimes in life, look, politics, if you just have one rigid position, I don't think you're doing politics well. Politics means responding to the moment. So if you were running in Minnesota for the House of Representatives, and there was a conservative Democrat and a right-wing Republican, and you had following you had done your work, you'd built a grassroots movement, and you want to run as an independent, go for it. Good, but I mean, I would likely support you if you were, a good candidate, and I have supported independents. But if you're running for president of the United States at a time when we have somebody who wants to undermine democracy, no, I don't think this is the moment for that.
Would you understand that decision to endorse?
I do.
Yeah.
Actually, I was wondering, to get back to the idealism versus the pragmatism, wouldn't you recommend to Joe Biden to make a shift to the right to make sure he maybe gets some votes from Trump voters?
Well, actually, I met with the president a while back. That's exactly what I did not say.
Okay, what did you say?
Well, I'll tell you everything I said, but I happen to believe that that would be not only a policy disaster, but a political disaster.
But maybe only for campaigning. So I would hate to listen. So this is not my idea of. But I was just wondering. It's like you said. It's choosing between two evils. So
No. It depends. I mean,
I'm glad you say so.
Okay. But this is what I think. In fact, what I believe, and I've suggested to the president, that if we can win 5 or 10%, even 5% of the people who vote for Trump, working class people, Biden will win in a landslide. That means 5% less for Trump, 5% more for Biden. Can we do it? Of course we can. And what you're seeing in terms of the strike of the automobile workers and Joe Biden, and again, let me be clear, I have very strong differences with Joe Biden. But Joe Biden was the first president in the history of the United States of America to walk on a union picket line, to make it clear that he was on the side of the workers in the most important strike that we have faced in many, many years. That is not unimportant. That is not only good policy, doing the right thing, it is good politics as well. I have worked with a lot of unions in America in the last several years on many, many strikes. And what we find is that I am told by the local leadership that half or 60% of their members, often white men, vote for Trump. If we can turn around 5 or 10% by having Joe Biden make it clear that he is prepared to take on big money and stand with the working class, that's good politics. That will be a strong victory for Biden. So that was my advice to the president.
What did he say?
Well, he's walked the picket line in Detroit. So, I'm not going to tell you what we say in a private conversation, but, I've said this publicly as well. In this, very often, good policy is good politics. Do you know what I mean by that?
Yeah.
If you do the right thing, for example, I have seen polling in America that polled just Republicans, got it to just Republicans. Do you know what the highest issue that they were concerned about? Very often older people who are quite conservative in many ways. It was not overthrowing the United States government. It was lowering the cost of prescription drugs. All right?
Yeah.
Now I'm going to introduce legislation, I don't know when, within a few months. We're going to do these things in a particular timeline, which will cut prescription drug costs in half. If the president endorsed that legislation, took on the drug companies, he would get millions of votes to do that. All right? So doing the right thing means representing the needs of the working class. It means taking on big money interests. And it means when you do those things, people say, well, it's about time somebody's working for me. So I do not urge the president to become more conservative. I urge him to become more progressive.
Thank you. I'm happy to hear,
And if you look at your career, and if you look at what would you say would have been the most influential period, weeks, months, years, you had to change or to make the agenda, the political agenda, more progressive?
Yeah, I don't look at it like that at all. It's just
It's
long. Yeah, it's not one thing. It's a million things. I mean, the fact that maybe most importantly, as I said earlier, there was a belief, I think, in Democratic Party circles that ordinary people, were fairly content with the status quo. I think we blew through that. Mm-hmm. And we made it clear that no, people were not happy. In fact, they were disgusted with politics in America. And it's gotten worse for right-wing Republicans trying to, shut down the government, et cetera. That people are hurting, that they want change. We made that clear. And I think a number of Democrats are beginning to catch on to that. And bringing young people into the political process has also been very, very important. Yes.
Yasmin?
Speaking of which, if you look at the political participation of young people, we talked about it beforehand, something that worries me is that young people are the minority right now, and it's only getting worse, so older people are the majority, which also means their vote counts much more than the vote of my generation.
Demographically also, you mean? Huh?
Demographically, yeah. And also young people tend to vote less than older people. So what I worry is that it will affect the political choices that are being made. obviously a lot of young people rallied up behind you. How do you think we can best give young people a voice in the political arena?
You know, it's, people ask me that question fairly often, and I will tell you honestly, when we began the campaigns, we never sat down, not for 1 minute, and said, okay, how do we appeal to young people? Never did. What we just did is talk about the issues facing America, and on virtually all of those issues, young people are more impacted than our older people, all right? Young people in America earn lower wages than their parents did. Everything being equal, and this is a sad reality. I don't know how it is here in Holland, but everything being equal, the younger generation in America will have a lower standard of living than their parents. You got that? I mean, moving in the wrong direction. In America, I was mentioning to you before we were up here, there are young people graduating college or graduate school, hundreds of thousands of dollars in debt, all right? And there are other young people who would like to get a higher education who can't afford to do that because the cost of a good college is $30,000, $40,000, $50,000, $60,000 a year. They can't afford it. So talking about issues, healthcare, education, ending student debt, canceling student debt in America. And I'll tell you another issue that brings young people into politics more than any other, and that is the climate issue. Your generation, I don't know what this world is going to look like 50 years from now. I don't know whether it's going to be habitable. There are young people in the United States, and I say this very sadly, young couples who say, we're not going to have any kids. We don't want to have kids because we worry very much about the planet and what kind of life they will have. How horrible is that? But those are issues that young people gravitate. Speak the truth to people, whatever it may be. Talk to them about the realities of their lives. Engage them in the process, and then fight for the change that they need. That's how you get people involved.
Do you still feel an activist or politician, or is there no opposition to it?
Well, as you indicated, you know, I live a strange life because, you know, a week from Monday night, I'll be back in Washington. I'm chairman of a committee. I vote all the time, and that's my job. That's what I'm paid to do. On the other hand, what I understand is that if that's all that I did, I would fail. So at the end of next week, I'm likely going to go to New Brunswick, New Jersey, to participate, to hold a hearing on a nurses' strike taking place at a major hospital there. So the answer is, I live in two worlds. I have to do my job, and I do it as best I can. I can't get the legislation that I would like. If I had my way, I would pass what we call Medicare for all, a single-payer system, a Canadian-style healthcare system. That's what I would pass tomorrow if I could. I can't. I don't have the votes. 0 Republican support, half the Democrats don't support me. So we do the best that we can there. But real change is going to take place from the outside, from the grassroots, from the unions, from young people, from working class people, from the strikes that are taking place right now. So I live in both worlds.
Can I ask you a Dutch example? For instance, Extinction Rebellion, that's an organization here in Holland, they blocked the highway, or the A12, for several days in a row, actually many days in a row. And there was a big controversy, of course, in the country, whether they should, whether they shouldn't. But what struck me is that no political party, and we do have a lot, and we do have some who are very much in line with the ideas of this, actually a younger movement for most of youngsters, but not all of them. It's a many generations. But nobody actually endorsed them to the full and joined them, though it's a mass movement, and which was quite striking to me. I thought it's telling. I was wondering, would you think that really joining sort of these sort of activists?
I can't, I can't give you an answer to that because I'm not
No, it's a
familiar with
Dutch
all the
example.
issues.
I
It is a
understand,
tactic.
yeah.
I would say that, as I mentioned earlier, climate change is an existential threat to the
Yeah,
planet.
you actually mentioned that's the action.
It is,
Yeah.
and it's a question of whether the planet will survive. And the goal now is to demand that your government and my government and China, the major emitter in the world, radically transform their energy system. The goal is right now, and I write this in the book, when I talk about these large corporate leaders being bad people, let me give you a few examples of what I mean. When I was a kid, the tobacco industry would be on television telling people they have doctors smoking cigarettes. They say, this is a good cigarette. This guy, a doctor was saying this. And most of you don't know this. It's a very famous picture in America of the executives from the tobacco industry lined up before Congress. And they all raised their right hand. They swear to tell the truth. And the congressman asked them, to the best of your knowledge, do cigarettes cause cancer and emphysema? And these guys, the CEOs of the major tobacco industries, said, oh, no, we have no evidence to it. And they were lying through their teeth because they had all of their scientists and their people who worked for them telling them exactly the opposite. They lied, millions of people died and are dying today. Some of them are still pushing cigarettes on kids. My father smoked 2 packs of cigarettes, died at the age of 58. Millions of people died needlessly young because of that. They lied. You had a Wall Street crash in 2008, which you're all familiar with, impacted the whole world. You had crooks on Wall Street who knew that they were selling mortgages that were worthless, which ended up causing the entire debacle. They lied and lied and lied. And right now, the biggest lie is the fossil fuel industry. I don't know how many of you know this, but the fossil fuel industry, these are not stupid people. They have good scientists working for them. Scientists were telling them 50 years ago that carbon emissions were going to warm the planet. 50 years ago. And they took that information and they hid that information. They funded organizations that denied the reality of climate. And they are destroying the planet. Got it? So these are not nice guys. They lie and they lie in order to make more and more money. So to the point about climate, this is an existential threat. We have got to take them on, end fossil emissions, carbon emissions in this world, or we're not going to have much of a planet left.
So would you go as far to join these sort of demonstrations?
It depends. I mean, in my country...
I mean, not particularly this one, of course, but you're not...
Look, I think that's a decision that young people or people involved have got to make. They have to make their own tactical decisions. If I'm a motorist driving down the highway, I'm probably not very happy about that.
No, probably not.
On the other hand, they're making their case. They're getting publicity regarding their situation. In America, what a lot of it was taking place, a rather significant way, is students on campus are demanding that their college administrators not invest. They have huge endowment funds, not invest in fossil fuel. And many universities are doing that. That's a big deal.
So what would you advise me, for example? Because sometimes it's a very hard balance to keep between taking the role of an activist or taking the role maybe of more of a lobbyist, for example. What would you say in your experience is more effective?
I can't tell you that. I mean, it depends on the moment and depends on the individual. Again, change, what I do believe, and I say this a dozen different times in the book, what I do know and do believe, that change never takes place from the top on down. You've got to force that change. Right now, the political leaders of countries all over the world are pressured by billionaires, right? By the fossil fuel companies or the drug companies, whatever it may be. That's where the pressure comes. And what we have got to do is build that pressure up from down below. And if you look at the history of America, which I'm more familiar with than Europe, if you look at the civil rights movement, or if you look at the women's movement or the gay movement, always, it took place from the ground on up, and then one day a president of the United States signs a bill.
Can we make it personal? Because sometimes I do activistic stuff, and then also left-wing politicians get really angry about not being polite enough or anything. And I'm always wondering, how do I influence, and I guess it's the same thing you ask yourself, how do I influence the people in power? And you are someone in power as a politician. Do you remember a time when you got influenced by activists and voted different than you thought you would do? Or maybe get pissed off because of what they did?
No, I mean,
walking
I
a
think
highway.
issues are raised. You know, people raise issues to my consciousness every day. It's amazing. I think one of the things you learn as a United States Senator is you cannot believe how many different issues are important to people. I mean, issues you would not have even thought of. You know, maybe you have a kid who has a particular disease, all right? And you know, the mom and the kid will come into the office, or you get a letter for thousands of people. Please do research into this particular form of diabetes or cancer, whatever it may be. But I think, you know, you're asking a good question, and all I will tell you, in terms of influencing politics in democratic societies, if the politician knows that many thousands of people believe in a certain way and are prepared to vote in that certain way, and are prepared to vote against that politician unless he or she does the right thing, that has an impact. That really does. So organizing at the grassroots level around issues, having a very clear agenda of what you stand for, and demanding that your political leaders, if they don't want to do it, don't expect you to be voting for them.
And if you get being angry about, you know, journalists, or because we took a small part of one of your programs, and I believe we have it. We can watch it for a second. I wonder whether we can have it on, because you're saying, can I make this personal? You know, how far should I go as an activist?
Yeah,
huh?
maybe that's the question. How far can we go, in your opinion?
Maybe, can we have a look at that? Is that okay, Tim? I think we have it.
I have to say, I brought a video of something I did, because when I talked to the programmer, I thought people would bring videos, so it's not, you know, it's not.
I think everybody has a video in their pocket.
No, it's stupid, I know, but it's not like Bernie. Check out what I did. But I still wanted to show you.
No, we thought it was very personal. It's very nice that you brought it, because it's a dilemma you bring to the... Can we have a look at it, or maybe we can't? Oh, we can, yeah. You can just explain what you've been seeing.
I need a new pair of glasses. So I wasn't able to...
Okay, so in short, there were 430 kids about to be thrown out our country because of weird policy. And I took one of those kids to the parliament and put him in front of the politicians. Good. And told them, he's going to be thrown out to Iraq. Can you explain to him?
That was a political leader of the Liberal Party and the political leader of the Social Democratic Party in the House, who were addressed by this 9-year-old kid.
9 years old. They were all pissed off. Journalists were pissed off. The NGOs
polite,
were
but pissed off. Yeah.
And my question to you was, which sounds very vain, but
I think that was a brilliant tactic.
Okay, thank you.
In other words, you didn't throw anything at anybody. I didn't hear anybody screaming.
No.
You had a child, right?
Yeah, basically, yeah.
A kid.
Yeah.
Who was asking a question to people who made a decision over his life. I think that is a brilliant way to use media, really.
Thank you.
Okay, now you have to... Now you can be, you know,
yeah.
I'm very happy you have...
I will leave now.
Yes, but it ties in with what you're saying, make visible what it actually does to people.
Yes.
Yeah, to real people.
Yep.
And make politicians aware of the fact that many people are willing to vote for those things they think are important.
Can I give an example?
Please.
Right now, as the youth union, we're working on the minimum wages, as you mentioned, for young people. Because in the Netherlands, the minimum wage for people under 21 is different than from people above 21. If you say make it visible for people, what I sometimes find difficult is that it seems to be accepted by everyone that the minimum wage is at that level, or that 18-year-olds get half of the minimum wage of 20, 21, 22, 23-year-olds for doing the exact same work. How would you deal with that?
Okay. Let me respond by quoting Nelson Mandela. And I may have it a little bit wrong, but this is what he said. Everything is impossible until it is done. Okay, let me give you a few examples. Not so many years ago, actually when I was in the Senate, so it would be less than 18 years ago, we have 100 members of the Senate. And I don't know, 17, 18 years ago, do you know how many women there were in the United States Senate? One. Okay, and I don't know how many there are now, 20, 25, or whatever. And within a few years, half the Senate will be women. When I was growing up in the southern part of the country, there were signs that said, this drinking fountain is not for black people, only for white people. Black people could not go to a movie theater. All of that, young people don't even understand that, okay? When I was a kid growing up, there was nobody, no student in my school, which is a big school, who acknowledged being gay, okay? None. The world changes. So the point that you make is that right now, you are arguing that people accept a two-tier system for the minimum wage, right?
Yeah, it's lower, yeah.
But when you change it, people 20 years from now will look back and say, I can't believe that. You weren't telling. That's ridiculous because young people have got to eat, they got to pay rent, they got to do, how could there be a two-tier system? So one of the things that happens after you accomplish the goal, people say, oh, that was easy. Of course that makes sense.
Yeah.
You know, women in America in the 1920 couldn't vote, all right? So the change is hard, but people will accept that. Our job, your job, all of our jobs, is to make it clear and educate people about social injustice and to fight for justice. I think in terms of the minimum wage, I can tell you that in my country, overwhelmingly, people support raising the minimum wage. Some of the Republicans want a two-tier system, like you have.
Would you agree that it's bogus, that the minimum wage for young people?
Should there be a system? No, I don't. I think it should be one minimum wage for all workers. No, of course. What I'm saying is some Republicans would like to do that.
Yeah.
I don't. No, we need a national minimum wage.
Can I maybe, and then we go to the public as well. There are many guests here. But in closing, if I read your book, it's a book in a way which says most of the political problems are still class problems. Problems of income, of...
Class and power.
Yeah, and it's power, and you write, it's a quote, don't hate Elon Musk, hate the system that made Elon Musk.
Yes.
And you're saying in your introduction, it's three people who each of them owes...
Not each, collectively.
Yeah, collectively, the three, they're more wealthy than the bottom half of the country. The three of those, and one of them is Elon Musk. But, so it's class, and it's obvious that if you mobilize, those people, there's millions of people, it's one man, one vote system, you should be able to win.
Yes.
Of course. But if you look at the politics of ethnicity and of identity, do you think that it's a problem for getting a coalition around the class issue, or you think it's helping to put together a coalition?
Politics is not easy. It's really not easy stuff. And how you bring people together, maybe that's why you have 31 political parties in Holland,
Yeah, well.
How you bring people, how you bring young people who have their set of interests, with somebody down the street who may be 80 years of age who's worried about his retirement benefits, right? That's not what you're worrying right now, and he's not worrying about your minimum wage. And somebody over there who's worried about affording housing, and somebody over there is worried about climate change. How do you bring people together? And what you have to do is to say, okay, this is my issue, that's your issue, I'm gonna support you, you're gonna support me. You have to worry about older people who are struggling. They have to worry about your generation. We all have to worry about climate. We all have to worry about racism and homophobia. And you need that kind of tolerance and respect for each other. But at the end of the day, to my mind, you see, there are some people in America who are well-intentioned and decent people who are fighting for a world in which says we're going to have a black, gay CEO of a major corporation. That's what we're fighting for. That's not what I'm fighting for. I'm delightful. It's very good if there's a black, gay CEO of a corporation. But I want to know what that corporation is doing, whether you're black or you're gay or whatever you may be. What are they doing to the workers? All right. So what I am fighting for is not just political democracy and a more vibrant political democracy, but economic democracy. A society, and here's one point that we didn't get into tonight. There is a major technological revolution that is taking place at this moment, and you all know that. It's robotics and artificial intelligence. So the jobs that many of you have today are maybe not going to be there in 20 years, or will be a very different job. Who makes those decisions? You involved in those decisions? Or are you simply going to be the recipient of somebody else's decision? So one of the issues that we are talking about in a changing world is how we bring people together to utilize technology for all people, not just the few. For the history of human society, people, and today, people struggle to put food on the table. They're struggling in Holland, they're struggling in America, they're struggling worse in Southern Africa and in Latin America, where they're living on a few dollars a day. Technology maybe has, if used appropriately, can create enormous wealth if we use it to benefit all of us and not just the owners of that technology. So if you have a job now and a machine can do that job, that's not a bad thing. But we cannot allow that machine, the owner of that machine, to throw you out on the street. It means a reduced work week. So instead of working 40 hours a week, you work 32 hours a week and earn the same money. That's a good deal. If there's difficult or repetitive work and the machine does it, not a bad deal. So what we have got to think, I want people to think kind of idealistically here. Think big. What kind of world can we create if we use this technology to benefit all, not just the few? What does a new society look like with this technology? How is it more democratic? How is it more vibrant? How do people better able to fulfill their potential? I don't know all the answers there, but these are some of the questions that we should be thinking about.
Yeah, and that in a time when these technologies bring forth people like Elon Musk, who are part of the oligarchization you're mentioning, actually he seems suddenly to even endorse sometimes the other oligarch on the other end of the world, Putin. Sometimes he seems to. So that's so
not an accident that he's next to the Emirates guys who are helping to fund Twitter. You have we don't discuss this enough. But you have a very small number of people globally who have owned tremendous amounts of wealth. Believe me, it's not just an American issue. American companies are investing in Holland and vice versa. These are issues that need to be explored.
I'm opening up for questions, and I know there's many of you who'd like to ask a question. And there's Marlijn Geurts, one of our editors, going around with a microphone. And going to the young people over here, I think. Yep. Let's see. Yes, please.
Hi. Oh, is it working? Okay, nice. Thank you. Thank you so much for coming here today. Thank you that I can ask the first question. I'm Erva. I have a question about this book that I'm always carrying with me. It's the Dutch Constitution. And I have a question about it. Because in the Netherlands we have this party system. You mentioned it earlier, where we have a lot of parties. How do you think that the two-party system that you have in America would work here? And how do you think that the multiple party system would work in America?
The political system in America now is in very bad shape. And it's not just the two-party system, which doesn't give people enough choice. It is the power of money in both political parties. In America right now, if you wanted to start a third party, and Yuri mentioned Cornel West, who's a friend of mine, trying to go that route, it is very hard for you to even get on the ballot. My assumption here, if you have 30 parties, it's probably not that hard to start a party, right? But in America, where to get on the ballot to be president, you need to do it in 50 separate states. Each state has their own laws. In my state, you go out and you get 700, 800 signatures, you're on the ballot. Pretty easy. Other states, it is extremely difficult. The idea, in general, I think I am sympathetic to a multi-party system. I'm also sympathetic to a more parliamentary form of government. One of the problems we have in America, and I say this at some risk because I represent one of the smallest states in America. My state of Vermont has 630,000 people. California has, I think, 30 million people. California has 2 senators, Vermont has 2 senators. Now, I think that's a great idea. but the people of California disagree. So how you create a representative democracy where people have choice, I think the parliamentary system is a better idea than the system right now in America. 30 parties in a small country may be a little bit much, but that's how I'd respond.
It's not that many in the second chamber, but it's about 19 at the moment. 21? What is it? 21. 21 it is. Yeah, 21. And there's a young man with a striped blouse over here.
Hi, thank you so much for coming here. I had a question that tied into prescription drugs, which you talked about before, and also the comments about activism that Tim and Yasmin talked about. So there's a bit of an access to medicines crisis going on, right? Where the newest drugs, life-saving drugs, are becoming more and more expensive and more unaffordable. We see in the Netherlands many of these drugs have been rejected now, and we're facing this crisis. But especially among young people, I see a lot of desperation. For example, there's a big group of students called UEM within your country and also here in the Netherlands that tries to make the medicines our universities develop more affordable or more accessible. However, even within our universities, we see a lot of pharmaceutical influence, and we're facing a huge industry, and many students lose desperation. We see this time and time again. And the really question is, how do we face such a big industry, and how do we face this crisis? Because before we know, the newest medicines will become unaffordable, except for the very
Thank you.
rich. Thank you.
That's an issue very dear to my heart. A number of months ago, we had the CEOs, I brought the CEOs of 3 major drug companies before the committee. We dealt with some degree with insulin, which in America, the price of insulin is very, very high, and diabetics suffer. We've kind of created a climate where they had to lower the price. But your point, I want everybody to hear it. What is your name again? Kai raised a very important point, is the drug companies now are not making their money big time from insulin or older drugs. They're looking at new drugs. In America, at least, something like 60% of the new drugs coming to market cost at least $200,000 a treatment. All right, so what does that mean? It means, A, that many working people can't afford it. If the government pays for it, it means the government goes into debt. It's a very huge expense. Now, I have been working on this issue, and I feel passionately about it. And let me add something to what you said. It's not only the price of new drugs, it is the fact that people all over the world are dying in poor countries, not in Europe, but in Latin America and in Africa, for drugs that cost 5 cents to manufacture, and the drug companies are not making it available. What happens in the pharmaceutical industry is enormously important. They have the ability, their scientists are great, to create life-saving, extraordinary drugs which can ease disease and pain and extend life. The demand has got to be is that those discoveries are used not just to make huge profits for the industry, but to save lives. And we're working on a number, and this is hard, as I mentioned earlier. In Washington, D.C., the drug companies have 1,800 lobbyists. They're very powerful. So what are we trying to do? For a start, in America, we provide $40 billion a year to the drug industry for research and development. Some of that money goes into universities for research. And we have made a little bit of success in saying that if we're going to use public money for research, the public has got to get that discovery at a reasonable price. We had some success in that. But ultimately, to my mind, we need a revolution in the way the pharmaceutical industry works. It is immoral, grossly immoral. I have a medicine here that it's life or death for you. You can't afford it, and it costs me a few cents to manufacture. You're going to die? That is insane. So, we're working hard on that issue. We're taking on all kinds of powerful forces. And the other problem is that in my country, for the average drug, it is far more expensive than it is for your country. Because we are the only major country on earth where the drug companies can charge any price they want, because we don't have a national healthcare system to negotiate with them. So they're going a little bit crazy because Biden and some of us passed some legislation to force negotiations. But I thank you for raising that issue. It is an enormously important issue we got to take on. There are wonderful scientists out there doing great things. And their discoveries should go to the entire world and not just to enrich the owners of the companies. So, thank you.
Yes, there's a lady over here with
Yes,
the red
thank you.
blouse.
Thank you very much. My name is Sophie. I'm a teacher. I rushed from the classroom to get in time here. And I'm wondering, on the topic of education, we didn't talk about that too much today, but when I was 18, I was an au pair in America, and I found out that everything that was in America hot back then came to the Netherlands. If it was like the nail salons or...
Oh, you're not going to tell a long story. You ask a question.
No, my question is, what can we expect on the educational field? The big problems in America, I think, back then were already the segregation. We are facing that now enormously here, and the lack of teachers. Can you tell me a little bit about your opinion about this subject?
We have some very serious problems. A number of months ago, we have serious problems which were made worse by COVID. COVID, I don't know about Holland, had a very profound impact on the country, on our country, economically and mentally. We have in America, I think everybody recognizes a mental health crisis, and we don't have enough psychologists or social workers or counselors to deal with it. One of the problems that we have is that we're having a very hard time attracting bright young people to go into the teaching profession. So if you go to the best colleges in America, Harvard, Yale, Princeton, and so forth and so on, very few of those graduates are going to go into teaching. Why is that? Because teaching salaries, starting salaries, are abysmally low. I mean, they're going to start you off at $25,000, $30,000 a year. And the climate, we are looking at a segregated system, not only by race, but by economics as well. If you're a rich white person, the strong likelihood is you'll have your kid in a private school. So the public schools will be increasingly children of color and poor white kids. And therefore, they're not going to get adequately funded. They become more difficult places. These are kids who are sometimes homeless, sometimes literally don't have enough food. And very often, you have disruptive situations which are difficult for teachers. So we need a revolution in education. What I have fought for is to make sure that every teacher in America gets at least $60,000 a year. That's a start to bringing good people into teaching. We need many other reforms, so that's one area that we're working on.
We're approaching the last question. There's a gentleman over there with a red checkered...
Yes, hello. Thank you for being here. My main question would be, we got ourselves sorted with a problem where trust in institutions is eroding. And in the meantime, we also have, well, embers of resentment that are far and widespread. Can we see more that it is also a solution right now that there is a powder keg, because we can find opportunities to reforge and re-imbue unions with that powder keg? We can re-imbue the parliament.
Excuse me. And what would be the concise question?
What? Oh, can we use the anger right now to re-imbue the relics like the parliament and unions?
Right. I'm not quite sure that I got the whole question on, so I apologize. But you're quite right in that faith in the United States, I speak of, which I know best, certainly faith in government is very, very low. Faith and respect for the media, very, very low. The right wing has even done a job in making faith in science lower than it used to be. So faith is very low. And in that climate, you get a lot of conspiracy theories can develop within that climate. I think the antidote, the best way to deal with it, it's not a magic solution, is to reach out to people who feel alienated in the political process, who feel alienated and don't believe that their ideas or their lives matter. Bring them in, create places, and we're seeing some of that in the United States, where they can voice their views and have some power in influencing decisions. But what I would call alienation, people's separation, people's belief that nothing they say or believe or feel matters, is at a crisis situation, and we need ideas to, once again, make people go beyond the despair that they're currently feeling.
I think there's a last question over there, the gentleman with the pointed finger in the air. That's the last question. I'm terribly sorry. We're with many. I'm very happy that you're also involved. I'm sure you have important questions, but this is the last question, I'm afraid.
Thank you. Mr. Senator, I have a question tying into the problem of climate change. I myself am a 20-year-old biology student. I'm very worried as well about climate change. And as you said in your opening speech, we need to tackle this problem, this crisis as a whole, with the whole international community. But right now, the world is very divided. Like, Russia is waging a war in Ukraine. We are supporting Ukraine. China is supporting Russia. America and China are in an economic race, as you could say. How do we possibly start such a big cooperation to tackle this crisis? That is, yeah.
Right. And on top of that, you have incredible wealth in Saudi Arabia and the Emirates, who make their money from fossil fuel. The point that you made, that I made earlier, that I think is right. We're not going to solve the problem unless there is international cooperation. And let me say a word about, China. The good news about China is developing right now. A whole lot of half of the electric vehicles in the world are now going to come from China. China is developing in America. We are dependent on China for solar panels. They're moving aggressively in wind as well. They deserve credit for that. On the other hand, but they will tell you for their own economic reasons, they're expanding their coal facilities, and now are by far the major carbon emitters in the world. I have talked to people in China and talked to American people who are working on the issue. It is absolutely imperative that we bring the United States and China together. And by the way, the president is going to be meeting with President Xi of China in San Francisco in the not too distant future. And I'm sure that at the top, a very high place on their agenda will be climate. It is absolutely imperative that these two, the major two economies in the world, make it clear that we're going to work together on climate. And I'll tell you why. If we don't, China, as you know, just recently, in the last several months, 1.5 million people were displaced by floods in the Beijing area. In my country, we have seen devastation from climate. It is in their self-interest, and they understand it. They understand that. So I am working hard to do what I can to prevent a Cold War between the United States and China and bring together cooperation to lead the world. We need everybody. We need Europe. And Europe, of course, has started investing very heavily in sustainable energy as well. Russia is another thing, and I have no magical answers to Putin and his autocracy. That's another story. How we get through there and get to the Russian people, I don't know. But right now we are working, trying to bring the United States and China together on climate issues.
We're drawn to a close. Thank you very much. You were at Buitenhof, one of our most important television programs yesterday. And you, as a last question, you raised an important issue because you said it's not economics which is dividing people. Most people think that, billionaires should pay their taxes. It's more culture. It's about abortion. And that gap, to breach a gap of culture, is a very difficult task, of course. And if it's not, the good news is that it's not economics. Most people agree that, healthcare should be good for everybody. But if it's a divide on culture, then we have a long struggle ahead.
Well, yes and no. I think for a start, there's going to have to be, in democracies, respect for people's difference of opinions, all right? Mm-hmm. So we have people who are, I respect, work with, who are anti-abortion. Right? Yeah. That's their religious belief. Yeah. I disagree.
We're a free society.
I disagree strongly with that, but that is their view. On the other hand, the point that I am making, that I have made, is that if we, in my view, stress where we can bring people together, you're right. In America, most people are outraged that billionaires pay a lower effective tax rate than does a truck driver or a nurse, okay? People agree on that. People believe that health care is a human right. Question about the pharmaceutical industry. There is no issue, whether you're Republican or Democrat, where there is more agreement that the pharmaceutical industry is run by crooks and are ripping off the American people, all right? So what we have got to do, you're never going to create a situation where everybody agrees on everything. Bring people together on the issues that we agree on, respect other people's point of view, fight for your point of view. But on all of the progressive issues that I delineate in the book, there is majority and sometimes supermajority support. So let's build on what we have and bring people together on that basis.
That's absolutely vital. There's a real starting point for cooperation. We don't need to hand out Prozac on this optimistic note. We'll stop this evening. I'm terribly sorry. There were many more questions. We could have gone into many more issues. But there's hope. Again, read the book. Het is okay om kwaad te zijn op het kapitalisme door Bernie Sanders. And I would like to thank, of course, Yasmin and Tim. And of course, Senator Bernie Sanders. Very much all three of you for joining our conversation.